What's up, everybody? It's Reggie Williams, founder and CEO of Ambrosia for Heads. And with me, I have Jake Payne, our editor in chief. And together, this is our What's the Headline podcast. And today we have two very, very, very special guests. Really, really been excited about this one. She is an award-winning performer, writer, musician, and composer working on stage and screen. She wrote and starred in the stage memoir Angela's Mixtape, which was named one of the best of the year by The New Yorker. And she wrote for both seasons of Spike Lee's Netflix series She's Gotta Have It, produced and wrote for FX's Justified City Primeval. You may recognize her from roles such as Mayor of Easttown, Pose, The Wire, House of Cards, and many more. She was also one of the original members of the cast of the Tony Award-winning Broadway play Passing Strange. And I know her as my awesome classmate from college, introducing Eisa Davis.
Hey.
Oh, great.
I know.
Your voice dropped an octave. You were
Sure
so
did.
abashed.
I really am. I always forget there's a bio behind me.
Yeah, there is definitely a major bio, and your partner in crime over there has a pretty long rap sheet too, and I use
Yeah.
it intentionally. He's a Pulitzer Prize, Grammy, Emmy, and Tony Award-winning songwriter, actor, director, and producer. He's written original songs for Disney's Academy Award-winning animated feature Encanto, as well as music and lyrics for Moana. He is the creator and original star of the Tony Award-winning musicals In the Heights and Hamilton. And he is one of the illest off-the-top freestylers you will ever hear. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, Lin-Manuel Miranda.
Hello, hello. Longtime fan, first time caller.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you both for joining. You are
Thank
here.
you.
Yeah, of course. You're here to talk about an incredible project you've just worked on based on the iconic film The Warriors. And I've listened to it multiple times. If I could describe it in one word, it would be epic. So my first question to you both is, why create a musical version of The Warriors?
Well, I'll tell you my journey with the movie. I think that's a good place to start. I saw it like most 80s unsupervised latchkey New York children from like my friend's older brother's cassette when I was 4 years old. And it was really my first mental map of New York City. Like I knew I lived closer to Cyrus than the Warriors because I lived in Upper Manhattan. I used to trace the Warriors' path up to the Bronx and back when I would take the train with my grandmother growing up. And so it's just taken up a big part of my brain. Like I think it has a lot of kids who grew up in New York City. And then in 2009, a college classmate of mine was working for one of the producers of the original movie, and he said, and this was around the time Issa was in Passing Strange and I was in The Heights. We were already friends, and he wrote me and said, "Warriors the musical," and I wrote him a whole email about how it could never work. My thinking being, action movies and musicals are fighting for the same storytelling real estate. Like when you can't talk anymore, you fight or you sing, depending on the genre. So I wrote him like that email, but he incepted me. And a part of my brain kind of kept working on it. Like kind of part of my brain was like, unless you did this. And so, cut to many years later, and I'm on the other side of having performed in Hamilton. And I'm really just coming up for air for the first time. That was such a life-changing cultural phenomenon and a lot of questions on what I wanted to do next. And when I took my first break, like really on vacation with my family for the first time, like I woke up one morning and the Warriors was there being like, we're here, and we know how to do it. We worked it out while you were doing all that other shit. And so a couple of sort of major ideas on how to change Warriors just enough to make it its own thing, to musicalize it. One of which was the gender flip of making the Warriors a female crew, which we've done for this album. Around 2018, when I was thinking about this, Gamergate was going on, which was like when these just like toxic men online were just doxing women for the cruelty and sport of it. And when I saw that happening in the real world, I thought, that's exactly what Luther does in the movie. Luther shoots Cyrus, points at another gang and goes, it was them. And now their night is ruined and everyone is trying to kill them. And I sort of connected those two chaotic acts. And that's what made me think of like, well, what if it's this group of women fighting their way from the Bronx back down to Coney to get home. And I knew I wanted to work with a collaborator, and I thought, who's smarter and cooler than me, and who has been doing hip hop theater longer than me? And I thought of Eisa for many reasons. We were friends, but we'd never written together.
Yeah.
And so we started working, and this is where I tag in Eisa, and she starts.
So yeah, why make a Warriors album on my side? Because Lin asked me. It's pretty simple. You know, if this titan of our culture says, hey, you want to join me on this ride? I would say, sure. And that's what I did. And it's just been, you know, this remarkable experience of trying to figure out, how do we make this 1979 movie really land in 2024 in a way that feels really relevant and also satisfies all of the original lovers and fans and stans of this film? And I think what was really important to us was to make sure that this gender flip, which was a brilliant idea that Lin had, was really specifically manifested in all of the interactions that the warriors have as they try to fight their way home. So, you know, everywhere they go, they're faced with people dismissing them for being women, you know, saying, oh, you're a cosmetology class, you know, and like, oh, you want to come and sit next to me? They're just like pervy predators on the street, right? So we wanted to make sure that everything that they faced was something that was very specific to them being women. And I really feel like, you know, something else that was so great about, you know, making it an album was that we got to reach into all of the different genre of music that represents what New York is, you know, as this patchwork quilt, you know, as this like olla podrida, right?
Yeah, it's a jambalaya.
You
like,
know,
you're gonna hear some salsa in the South Bronx. You're gonna hear some, you know, house music on the Upper West Side. Like, we just got to use New York as a canvas and an excuse to write in all these different genres, whatever served our characters best.
Yeah, yeah. And you know, for the album, making an album meant that we got to work with all of these artists that, you know, we wouldn't normally be able to work with if this were a musical on stage first, right? So we got to call people like the RZA, we got to call Mark Anthony, we got to call Ms. Lauryn Hill and Kim Dracula, and they were able to open up the world of this film and this narrative in ways that we never even expected. And it got to, I'm so glad you feel that it's epic, because that's what we wanted it to be.
Yeah.
You know, and on the production side, you know, you involve Mike Elizondo. And I think to the
Yes.
audience that we have at our platform, Ambrosia for Heads, folks know him from Dre and Eminem and 50 Cent. What made him, as you talk about all the different genres and the different flavors of New York, what made him the perfect producer as a companion for this?
First of all, Mike has like a resting pulse rate of like like he's the chillest man in showbiz, which is a nice counterweight to the two of us.
I know. It's so
He's just like, yeah, that'll work.
He's such a Jedi. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, he just comes in and he is just like so smooth. Like, yeah.
But that versatility is exactly like
He can do anything.
He can do anything. He played bass on pretty much everything on The Chronic and half of Eminem's joints and 50s joints.
But he also
and
played bass on Fiona Apple's Extraordinary Machine.
He produced,
and produced
that,
that.
yeah.
Exactly.
And also, like, I got to work with him on Encanto. You know, that's another one where we were playing in a lot of different genres, specific to Colombia, but like as much variety as I could get into Colombia, and he could just kind of roll with anything. And so he was really happy when we brought in the metal angle for Luther, because he played in a metal band in high school.
That was his,
and
I mean, that's what he thought he was going to be, you know, as a kid. That was his aspiration, was to be in metal bands.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, and so just, I think that kind of genre play is like catnip to Mike. So he was all in. And you know, the other reason to do this as an album first is really to get to explore the sound and musicianship before you're worrying about staging, before you're worrying about lighting. So we spent 2 weeks in Mike's studio, just with a killer house band, the best musicians in Nashville, just like bringing in the songs and playing with them, which is not a luxury you get a lot when you're writing a show for the stage. It's so much about the actors and so much about the storytelling. We really got to explore music in a more profound way than I have on any of my previous projects.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, so part of what lingers in the zeitgeist is phrases that are repeated in the film. So, can you dig it? And warriors come out to play. So, can you both talk about the power of a refrain?
Listen,
Ooh,
that's a great question.
yes, it
I mean,
is.
and everyone from ODB to Common, I always think of Commons, it wasn't us, it was them. Quoting like
Yeah.
the deepest of deep Luther cuts in one of his early albums, to as recently as LL's new album, where the opening track is called Spirit of Cyrus.
Right.
And he samples a brother in the crowd going, Cyrus, we're with you.
Brother. Yeah, we hear you.
So the power of this movie has been you know, huge for hip hop, for
Yeah.
hip hop artists and the culture.
Yeah.
And again, like a refrain, that's like our bread and butter as theater writers. Like, to me, the most impactful thing you can do is introduce a theme, connect it to a character, and then as the story goes on and that character changes or comes up against things, like bring it back around in interesting ways. One of the things we do in the album is a roll call. The first way you meet the Warriors is they have this like sung refrain that they sing in order, and that's their like attendance check. And you hear names drop out over the course of the album and over the course of the night. So that's like a really simple but powerful one, but noted by its absence
Yeah.
as their numbers dwindle over the course of their journey.
When you ask about the power of a refrain, you know, something that has always stuck with me is when Quincy Jones said, you know, on working with Off the Wall and Thriller, that what you do is you don't just have one hook, you make the entire song hooks, right? Every single moment is a hook that you can sing. And that has always just been, I mean, that's the epitome of what you want to do with a song, to have that level of stickiness, right? And that's what we wanted to do. I mean, it's like from the get, I just said, you know, we want this album to be something that people sample.
Yeah, no samples on the album.
Right.
We are the album that gets sampled.
Yeah, yeah. And so that's what we were thinking, was just like, what's something that's going to be, again, something that's so specific to this record, so specific to what it is that we want to say, but has the broadest reach.
Yeah, and I think the best example on the album of that is we have this opening number with six MCs representing the 5 boroughs of New York, and then later in Union Square, when like the Warriors are up against it in the biggest fight of their lives, we bring samples from the opening song back around. So you hear we're actually sampling from our opening number, but like with full record scratches and just like getting at the power of sampling and bringing a refrain back around in a particularly hip hop way was really satisfying.
Yeah. So I think we think about it also with this being like a score. We think about refrains also as themes, as motifs that are just returning and woven back and back. And then you really do have this power of return, you know. It's like your memory is activated from something that you heard in the very beginning when you hear it again at the end, and it just has this very emotional impact.
It's like those interludes on the Carter 4, where it's like it's the same beat, but then by the end it's like Busta and Andre 3000 and Nas on it, but it's the same beat like coming like 3 times throughout the album.
Yeah.
Good example. You know, the interesting thing is like Cyrus is only on screen for less than 10 minutes in the film, but to the examples you just used, Lynn, like he's one of the most compelling characters. Why do you think that's so, both of you?
Well, I mean, let me know if I hijack your answer, Issa, but I think what Issa brought out in our musicalization that I think was always there in the Warriors is the promise of peace, is that if we stop fighting each other, we have enormous power. And I think that is an incredible message. And I think that's also what led to our casting Miss Hill as our Cyrus with no plan B. Like, we're celebrating the what anniversary of Miseducation, and that album still holds so much power to us all these years later, that she was the only option, because if everyone's going to leave their neighborhoods and their safety to go hear a message of peace and unity, yeah, I buy Miss Hill as the person who can deliver that message. Like one of the few
Yeah.
artists in our world who
Yeah.
I think could credibly fill that role. And with just a few minutes, because we only got one song with her, like have a similar impact that Cyrus had in that movie.
Yeah, and I think, the LL track is Spirit of Cyrus. And what we wanted to do is, even though Cyrus dies, we wanted to make sure that the dream of peace doesn't die.
Yeah.
And so, in our version, there's Cleon, right? Who is kind of ambiguously left in the film,
Slowly
elbowed
elbowed
to death,
into a
right?
circle.
Right? You just elbowed, but we don't know quite what happened. We assume that,
Never
that
see him
Cleon dies. But then what we wanted to do is sort of have Cleon embody the spirit of Cyrus through the rest of the record. And, there's a peace meeting in the original Greek text that this is based on. And that's in the novel, and then it is in the film. But I don't even know if Walter Hill was aware of the actual peace meeting that happened in 1971 on Hoe Avenue in the Bronx, right? But that was really important for me to really think about that. And also, when we're talking about sexism and misogyny, the fact that the co-ed gangs, the gangs that had women in them and girls in them, the women at that peace meeting were told to sit at the back. And there were all women, all femme gangs that were not even allowed to come into the meeting, who were just like outside in the cold because it was in December of 1971. So in some ways, what I'm hoping we get to do is do that history over a little bit, where we have that peace meeting, but we also have women at the center of that leadership, and that dream of peace, which is something that we all need a lot of right now.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. As literally going to be the next thing I talked about. That just for the audience, the Greek story was called Anabasis, and it was written in approximately 370 BC or so, and it's about an army of Greek mercenaries that fought their way back from Persia across Greece. So, like the warriors making their way home after a killing of someone of significance. And you mentioned the Black Benjamin meeting that happened after he was killed in the Bronx,
Right.
trying to navigate peace between leaders. So one of the things I wanted to know if you knew that actually was one of the precursors to hip hop. When that
Yes.
happened,
100%.
Yes.
yeah,
I mean, the fact
yeah.
that Benji Melendez and, the Ghetto Brothers, I mean, we know Ghetto Brothers by their music, right?
Yeah,
That they
yeah.
were a gang that then, became this incredible band that again is sampled, and that, that meeting in 71 really births hip hop in 73. And I
Right.
think that's something that we were trying to do in this record also, with that phrase of this is the sound of something being born, that there's a beautiful way in which that drive toward peace is that we don't have to fight each other, hand-to-hand combat or shoot each other or knife each other. We can rhyme against each other. We can battle against each other on, the linoleum as B-boys and B-girls, we can like tag, and that all the four elements can be the way that we express our pride and our crews. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So yes, I'm so glad that you feel and are making that connection, because we want that in there.
Yeah, we're very
Absolutely.
conscious of that.
Yeah. So another thing, you've talked a lot about the portrayal of women in the film, and you mentioned what was happening later on, more recently. Another thing that needed kind of updating was the homophobic themes that were prevalent throughout the film.
Talk
Right?
about
And
it.
so, yeah. And so I thought it was interesting that you kept the character of Mercy as a woman instead of flipping her into a man. And I wanted to know if that was intentional to kind of counteract some of that homophobia that was in the original film.
For sure. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, listen, I think that once, again, the reason flipping the gender of the warriors was interesting to me was like it complicated every plot point of the movie. I was like, oh, now it's not just, oh, the guys see pretty girls called the Lizzies and they walk away. It's, well, wait, what would convince these women to go walk with a group of men? And for me, Mercy is just one of my favorite movie characters ever. She is the only woman on this block of this gang called the Orphans, but they're clearly terrified of her because she's so powerful. Like she has such a power unto herself and the bravery to leave everything you know, because that way of life might be better than this way of life. So I never thought about flipping her gender because I just think she carries her own power within the film as is. And so then that made, that made Mercy and Swan sort of same-sex love story, which totally tracked for me. Like I wasn't like, that's weird. Like it was just like, oh, that totally makes sense.
Yeah.
And I think that, another sort of clue came to us. I think Eisa sent me a podcast. I think it was, I don't remember which podcast it was, but it was an interview with Walter Hill. And he was talking about how in his original script, he had written a gay gang. And he was like, but Paramount was not going to let that fly in 1979. It was just not going to happen. But, ballroom culture is already happening in New York at this point.
Yeah,
like,
completely.
It is very much a street subculture in New York. So Walter saying that gave us license to be like, well, we absolutely have to have the House of Hurricanes.
Yeah.
And
go ahead. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say that it actually was kismet because I was like, well, we definitely have to have, a queer trans gang. I mean, come on, we have to. And then it was hearing that Walter already had this in mind. It was like kind of finding that out after the fact.
Yeah.
And then it was just like, okay, this is definitely something that we want to do, and that the film, the sort of, what the film wanted to do and just never was able to for whatever reason. And so that's something that I think is really important towards combating the homophobia that's there in the 1970s. Yeah, exactly.
I think both of you really took a nice job of your own passion for the film and made it into a love letter for New York. Like, and you included that, the Gray's Papaya, mentioned at 72nd Street and Van Cortlandt Park. But I want to ask, and you alluded to this a little bit at the top, but in your minds, what year is this version of the Warriors set in?
It's slippery, isn't it?
Because I think it's 1979 shot through a 2024 lens.
Right.
Right. I think that we gave ourselves license, particularly, with the Busies. The Busies, formerly the Lizzies in the movie. We were like, what is the safest, most unthreatening group of guys that could actually lure these women away from their mission after they've been getting chased by dudes all night? And we wanted to make the boy band to end all boy bands. And so that's probably our most 2024 moment, because we've got a little Boys to Men in there. We've got a little New Edition in there. We've got a little, we've got the charismatic, sweet white lead in Steven Sanchez. We've got the Wanye with Josh Henry. We've got the hold it down bass with Timothy Hughes. And then fully 2020s, we've got a full on K-pop, hip-hop breakdown, and we called our friend Helen Park to write the Korean lyrics for that section. So it sort of is all of the boy bands of all the eras mashed into one. All that power is required to get these women to go let's go with these guys.
Yeah, and I think Quiet Girls to some degree, which is, the House of Hurricanes track, I think that also is, after 1979. We have, I went back and forth with Lynn about Going Down, which is one of the Luther tracks that Kim Dracula sings, because, there's a whole Pac-Man thing, and Pac-Man came out in 1981 or something like that.
Yeah, I missed it by 2 years.
So we were like, that's okay. We'll be okay with that, So I think it's that we wanted to make sure it was still a world where, they had the constraints. They didn't have phones. They're not going to be able to call an Uber to get back to Coney. We wanted to make sure that they had the constraints of 1979, but also, weren't constrained by the, again, sexism and homophobia of the time. Yeah. We wanted to be able to be reverent toward that time, but not be, confined by it.
Yeah.
I love the way you flipped the Central Park scene. Ajax is a problematic character in the original, and this time it's our heroes are getting catcalled, and you still get the same outcome with the arrest and all that. It's just a really wonderful job.
Yeah, and James
Nice.
Remar, who played Ajax in the original film, is that perv on the park bench. That's his voice.
I did not know that. That's
Yeah,
cool.
right?
Wow.
Yeah, so he gets to
Yeah.
revisit that scene from the other side.
Yeah.
Amazing. Amazing.
Yeah.
You know,
And that was
so
also, oh, that was also really fun because, I was like, yeah, we got to make this a perv, like the kind of person that, messed with me when I was a kid all the time, and people still telling you, oh, you'll be pretty if you smile.
mm,
But
Yeah.
then what was really great was Lynn was just like, we can make the dialogue pretty much the exact verbatim lines that are in the film,
It's
but it just
essentially the
flipped.
dialogue from the movie,
Yeah.
and it's
yeah,
almost exactly the same.
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, so one of the key themes of the film and well, the story in general is the spread of misinformation. And,
Mm.
what lessons can we take from that in a time where misinformation is more spread and more quickly spread than ever before?
Yeah, I mean, a lie is halfway around the world while the truth is still putting his pants on.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's the whole, I mean, that's the whole thing, right? Like the murderer turns to the warriors, says it was them, and that's their night.
Hmm.
I think that, you know, I don't have any easy answers. I think that um, misinformation spreads even more easily now with the advent of the internet. But I also, I think that whether it's in 1979 or 2024, that fear is real.
Mm,
I always, when I first talked to Issa about this project, I was like, this is like a map of all my fears, like the things I have bad dreams about, all like given like visual contemporaries in one movie. Like if you're a New Yorker, you're scared of falling in the subway tracks. You're scared of like the wrong cop in a bad mood on the wrong night.
mhm,
You're scared of just being on the wrong block at the wrong time, and you're scared of being accused of something you didn't do, and I think that's only been accelerated by the speed of internet misinformation, and so it just makes something that was true then even more relevant now.
Yeah, it's something that, I think about like um in terms of my family history, Angela Davis is my aunt, and it was a kind of misinformation that made her falsely accused, and it took a whole trial for her to be acquitted. And I think there's something that the Hurricanes say in that song, Quiet Girls, let the people know. Let the
mm.
people know that you're innocent, that you are not guilty. And I mean, that's really all we can do, right? To fight misinformation is to keep doing all we can to tell the truth and make sure that people who are falsely accused are exonerated.
Mm. As long as I've known you, I don't think I put that together, but it makes total sense about your aunt being an Angela Davis. That's amazing. So I guess we'll end on this question. There have been another thing that is a real theme in the Warriors is the thought of tribalism, right? And there have been a lot of truces among tribes over the years, some led by hip hop, like we discussed with Black Benji, but they
Yeah.
very, very rarely endure. And now with social media and the internet, there's more tribes than ever before. So, what lessons are there to be learned from the Warriors about tribalism?
Mm.
Well, I think that, you know, Indians, I mean, I think Issa's big insight when she came to this project fresh, having not seen the movie before working on this, was they're all animated by the prospect of peace. That is something we all want. We all want to be able to go home at the end of the night. We all want to be able to go out and know we're going to come home.
Mm.
We all want to walk around our city or our town free from fear. And that's very hard to keep top of mind when we other each other,
Mm.
and pick sides.
Mm.
But that we all want the same thing at the end of the day. And you know, I'm grateful she had that insight because I think by keeping Cleon alive and
Mm.
not slowly elbowed to death like he is in the movie, I think we keep that dream throughout the story. But it was always there. That's what's wild to me. Like I think about that scene on the train just before Coney, and they're dead tired and they're on that train, but they still have their dignity when they're faced with like a completely other class getting on the subway. That beautiful wordless sequence that we narrate in our album as well. It was always there, and so I think that's what we have to cling to.
Yeah. I mean, I think that there's either you look at your differences and find something to fight over, or you celebrate those differences. And I think that's what is so compelling about, the Warriors as a gang, is that they're saying, we're family for each other, but, we also are admitting the possibility that everyone is feeling the exact same way about their crews. And what we want is not to fight. We actually want peace between each other. And so, I mean, that's what I want for all of the tribes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really do.
Well, the Warriors, the album is a celebration of culture. It's a celebration of music. It's a celebration of an amazing film. So thank you both, Eisa Davis, Lin-Manuel Miranda. We really appreciate you.
Thank you.
you.
So
Thank you
good
for
to
the time.
see you.
Yeah, great
Appreciate
to
it.
see you too.